varying the live stream. So once we go live, and I'm going to record locally. Whew, that was close. Imagine not recording. Jesus, what? That's going out. So what I'm going to do is can you hear me?
Yeah.
Twice?
Clear as day.
I'm going to mute this. So can you still hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So we're now live on YouTube. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a step back. I'll let you guys introduce it, but can I suggest that you wait for maybe 3-4 minutes before you introduce it?
Well,
it'll give me a chance to share the link on Twitter.
Yeah, you need to wait for somebody to join. There's only the 4 of us at the moment.
Yeah, see, this is the thing. I'm at the moment, nobody's going to join us until we get the link out. So I'm going to you chat amongst yourselves there.
I'm just throwing away, going silent here on this. I have a backup. If my Powtoon thing doesn't work, I have a backup of it recording. So
can I ask Helen and Dermot, page 18 of the report? Is it the particular observation that the creation of new knowledge and digital artifacts was not a well-established practice? Is that the thing that we're supposed to be responding to?
So we're talking about knowledge creation. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. And in that report, it states that the teachers are having particular difficulty or finding that aspect of digital learning particularly challenging.
Yeah. Do they define what it is?
Say that again?
Do they define what it is?
But there's a discrepancy between their definition and the UNESCO definition.
Excellent.
I touch on that lightly in the my presentation, Richard. Yeah.
Can I go first with my one? Because mine is sort of more general, and then Dermot, yours is like a real deep dive.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Yeah,
that's absolutely
cool. Yeah. And then Richard, you present then for five minutes on the topic.
Yeah.
Richard, I'm going to be keeping time, and we're pretty strict.
And
when you want me to present, do you want me to talk about the 8 questions then or later?
No, that comes afterwards. Yeah, in the timetable.
Okay.
Yeah, that you have. So you see, Dr. Richard Millwood presentation on knowledge creation, or what you will have a different take on it than we would, obviously.
Well, I hope so. In a valuable way, I mean.
Yeah, 100%. And then after you've finished, I will then ask you the eight questions.
Yeah.
And I'm taking a look at your responses here. One of them is very short, Richard. Oh.
Well, they're only been developed in the last 20 minutes.
Oh.
My friend Stephen Heppel, who I used to work with for 17 years, he said, leave it to the last minute, it'll only take a minute.
A creative tension. I call that the creative tension.
I hate it. I should have been spending all day on this, and I didn't. I never got to it until now.
Yeah, I'm just going to check the date the email was sent, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, that was sent.
But the important thing is we're not talking for long, and I've got a wealth of things to share that I've already had in my back pocket. So that's the way I've approached it.
That's true. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so
I feel very blessed to be here, by the way. Thanks.
Thank you for
thank you for being here.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a sanity check of being connected back to Ireland again after months of Boris Johnson and other shit here, and Trump and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, just
people in front of me, and I can see Hassan too.
We're live.
We are live.
We're live.
We're live.
That's fine. There's only us 4, you know.
No, see, I'm looking at the YouTube channel, the numbers on the YouTube channel, and
yes, so there is a recording going on. I forgot.
Yeah,
this could be in history.
But so don't forget, the numbers that you see, Richard, on your Zoom screen are completely different to the numbers we're seeing on YouTube.
Yeah.
So let's just ignore that. Let's just start. How's that? The link has gone out onto Twitter. I'll leave it to you.
Thank you.
Okay, so welcome Dermot and Richard, Dr. Richard Millwood. We're going to do our this week's or this month's webinar is about knowledge creation. So I just going to, I suppose, briefly explain. Dermot, do you want to say anything before I start talking anymore?
No, Helen, you fire away. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah.
Okay, so basically it's looking at knowledge creation, and I suppose in a bit of you know, applying it in the real sense. What I've done is just to be like you, Dermot. I want to you've been using your Doodly, that's what it is, to create your little videos. So I decided I'm going to learn something new, and I'm using Powtoon. So it's nothing like I think learning when you've got a need to learn something, and I think it will be useful at times, you know, when in the classroom. But also, what I was very conscious of was how was I learning, and you know, so I was, you know, I knew what you could do. I'd seen what you know with the writing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I wanted that, and also I, you know, like say I would have edited videos and stuff like that. But still, you're the whole time looking at the user interface. You're saying, where's this? You know, how do I make the MP4? You know, and you keep on hitting dead ends, and you have to go back, and you get frustrated, and you make mistakes. And I think it's all those. So that's what was happening. So anyway, I have created this like sort of 2-minute Powtoon, and it is my first attempt. But again, it's just I really like, I kind of, it's like sort of a meta learning for me of how you learn like your knowledge, and you're applying it based on previous experiences. So what I've also done is done a backup, because I was just trying to run this here a few minutes ago, and I think it must be it's my computer. It's a bit glitchy. So we'll see how it goes. Okay. But it's all live, and this is live. Okay. So I'm going to just share out my screen here. So just bear with me. Okay. Now this is it here. Okay. So it's here. You should be able to see that. Now, if this is okay, so that's it. That's sort of at a high level, and I think what we're. Thank you very much, Richard. So what I was trying to say this is, so this, and Dermot, you're going to show yours now, sort of a more of a deep dive. But what I was trying to think of it, and I was thinking with my classes today, I'm teaching computer science, and I was looking at my 5th year computer science students today. We're working in groups. They were making a microbit. They were using the microbit. They were making Fitbits. So they were in groups, and I just like, there was just a diversity of ideas, the group knowledge, how they applied, you know, their experiences to it. and trying to problem solve. And also what was interesting, they all had the same brief. They had a week to make this Fitbit, and it's incredible, the diversity of ideas and the ingenuity. And when I was reading that brief document about knowledge building, that's what I'd never come across, that term ingenuity gap. And that's really, I think that's fascinating. So at that point, I'm going to hand over to you, Dermot.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Helen. So that was really visual presentation. Powtoon, is that?
Powtoon. So there,
Powtoon.
I'm cheap. Okay, so that is. I didn't go for that's just the free version. So you are restricted, but it's just very interesting. But you've inspired me because you were using Doodly. So I was just looking up stuff. So that's how it works. This diversity of ideas and sharing.
100% it does. Yeah, 100%. I've reverted back to type maybe a little bit this week. I've used Camtasia and PowerPoint just to make a presentation. And I suppose, like Helen, a lot of this comes from the DES 2020 report on the state of digital learning in primary and post-primary schools. And they were looking especially at analysing the effectiveness of the digital learning framework of achieving the goals of the digital strategy for schools. So that's really where we're coming from tonight. And then some issues were highlighted in the report, and the one that we've particularly zoned in on tonight is that teachers are having difficulty with the concept of applying a knowledge creation approach to teaching and learning in formal education or in primary and post-primary schools. So I suppose we thought we'd have a crack at it. We're not masters of it. Richard will obviously bring us through that gap, but certainly we can show some evidence ourselves of what we have tried. So I'm going to share my screen as well. So it's a short, I think it's about 3.5 minute presentation. And it's Camtasia and PowerPoint. Okay, so I'm going to go over to here. You can let me know. So can you see that screen?
Yep.
Great. And then I hope you can hear the audio now as well. Welcome to this short presentation on knowledge creation. What is knowledge creation? Well, there are two similar but different guidelines on knowledge creation. The first comes from the Department of Education, and the second is taken from the UNESCO ICT Competence Framework for Teachers. In a recent report from the Department of Education, 52% of post-primary and 44% of primary level lessons observed aligned with the knowledge creation approach. And teachers reported finding this aspect of digital learning particularly challenging. How to design, implement and evaluate a knowledge creation approach to digital learning. First, I'm going to take the knowledge creation approach from the UNESCO ICT Competence Framework for Teachers, and I'm going to take a pedagogy first approach. And the pedagogy I've chosen is a socially constructivist pedagogy, as there is alignment between knowledge creation and social constructivism. Next, I'm going to choose a design model, and the design model I've chosen is the Bridge 21 model, because that aligns with a socially constructivist and socially constructionist approach. Then I'm going to design the activity. So I have a setup stage, a warm-up stage, investigate stage, a plan stage, a create stage, present stage, and a reflect stage. To break it down, what do the students have to do? Students have to record their progress through each task in a design document. Students have to build a model of a house that uses forms of sustainable energy. Students have to present their learning to the class and engage in a question and answer session. What does the teacher have to do? The teacher has to evaluate the design document and ensure that each task is completed. The teacher has to collaborate with the students while they're building the model and researching forms of sustainable energy. The teacher has to assess the students' competence during their presentation. There is some evidence of the students' design document, the brainstorm, their problem statement, what they are going to do in their research, the tasks, the roles, alignment between the tasks and roles, the schedule of the tasks and activities, and a short reflection. Here's some evidence of the model. This is the house with a solar-powered light and a geothermal fan. And they have put the microbits and the wiring in the attic of the house. Evidence of their presentation with the problem statement. And then we can review the lesson. So we can review it against the Department of Education guidelines for knowledge creation, UNESCO guidelines for knowledge creation. And we can also align it then against the digital learning framework for primary schools. So here I've aligned it against pupils enjoy their learning, are motivated to learn, and expect to achieve as learners. And again, I then consider whether this would align with statements of effective practice or statements of highly effective practice. Okay, so that's my 2 cents on knowledge creation. And again, what I did was I followed the whole process. You know, I took the UNESCO guidelines, the DES guidelines, and then, as people like Richard have always been encouraging me, took a pedagogy first approach, utilized a design model, which is one we've talked about quite regularly, Helen, the Bridge 21 model, and then followed the plan, the implementation, and the evaluation. And I'd argue that is thereabouts. You know, there's bits and pieces, obviously, that longer term you could develop further, for example, but I was quite happy with the outputs of the lesson. And it's interesting, Helen, how earlier you had mentioned learning from me, maybe watching the Doodly videos. I learned the microbits from Richard. And there is a nice hook to bring Richard into the conversation.
Would you like me to pick up now and say something about my ideas then? Thanks, Dermot, and thanks for the compliments. You should know that they're returned to both you and Helen because of the discussions we've had over the years in the CESI context have always led to my enlightenment. But my reaction to both the report and to both your presentations is one of the pedantic, boring old farts in academia, although I'm not particularly there now, but that's nevertheless how I feel, is to ask the question, what do we mean by knowledge in the first place? What on earth is this knowledge that we're creating? Where is it? You know? And I think that the term is used rather loosely to mean information and media that children make, stuff that they create. I would like to challenge that and talk about a richer model. So I'm going to share my screen now and look at this model of what is it that we expect from students. Yeah. Now, can you see all that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
This is not original on my part entirely, although the graphic is. But the idea of head, hand, and heart is quite old. But it helps me to think about what is it I'm looking for from my students. I'm looking for them to know things for sure. The knowledge is in their heads. It's not the media they make. It's in their heads, and it's part of the competence they have to be able to achieve in the real world, to fulfill themselves, to be happy, to be productive, to be artistic, all kinds of things. So competence is, to me, the overarching thing that I'm trying to achieve, and knowledge is a part of that. And a really important part of it is what I'd call craft, the second column in my diagram, which is about the stuff that Dermot was showing us, really, that capacity to make the stuff that works. And incorporated in that is the other hateful word, skills. Skills is part of craft. Skills to me is something about step-by-step process that you like a recipe, you know, you follow what the thing is. But it has another important aspect, which is the evaluation, being able to say, have I made something of worth? Is it actually working or not? Those kinds of judgments that you have to make when you make something. But of course, the one that everybody misses and forgets about, unless you push them hard, is the character side that we hope to develop in our children. And character is such an important part of that competence to achieve that it has to be given equal ranking to knowledge and craft, in my opinion. And yet it often isn't. Now, I don't need to belabor this, do I? I just wanted to put knowledge in its place. Knowledge is in people's heads. Information and media is what they make. And so when they talk about knowledge creation, I don't think they mean what the children learn, even though they do. they mean that they learn by making media and information. I think that's the knowledge they're talking about. And that would be a point of discussion in anything that follows from now on. I may be wrong, of course. I think that's all I wanted to say.
I think it's Richard, just jumping in there. I love that about character and, you know, that heart and caring, and that, like today, you know, all of my fifth years, I just saw them. They were just so like that, you know, they made things work, and, and they created it from, you know, it was a craft, and some of them, you know, there was junk art involved there as well. And some of the students, you know, they were making, you know, wristbands out of, you know, string, you know what I mean? You know, like, so that's just brilliant. You know, it's really good to see that.
Yeah. So you can find that diagram on my blog in case we'll come to that later if necessary.
Okay, so we're going to hand over now. So Dermot, you're going to ask the famous 8 questions. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, that is correct. And this is great for me because I suppose, Richard, in our early years, you performed the role of my supervisor for a number of years. And I suppose I never got the opportunity to ask you the questions. So it might be nice to have the roles reversed.
Just for the listeners here, that's not the way supervision works. Students ask all the questions. Supervisors just try and dampen them down a bit and stop them from being too excited.
Okay, right. So yeah, and just for the listeners, again, we have 8 questions, which Richard has previously looked at. He has 1 minute to answer each question, and these are questions which we ask every guest who we have on the show. And obviously, at some stage, we're looking to put them together and maybe, you know, investigate them or examine them with a more critical eye. So Richard, if you're ready, I will start with question 1. Fantastic. So question 1 is, who or what triggered your interest in the educational use of technology?
So my first connection with educational technology was when in 1978-9, around that time, the school I was teaching maths and computer studies in received a new Research Machines 380Z computer. It's fantastic, you know, and better still, it was put in my care. Yeah. So I took this home every weekend and played with it, and I upskilled myself. I increased my craft in computing and programming in particular through working in BASIC and that. And I was desperate to make a program that would make a ball bounce around the screen. This is for my satisfaction, my fulfillment, nothing to do with kids or teaching, just I wanted to know better what was going on here. And I made that program, and then so proud of it I took it in and showed the children in my maths class. And they took to it like ducks to the water. They got on with playing with it. And some of them went running to the cupboard to get protractors out to hold them against the screen to work out the angle they should put into the computer to make the ball go in the pocket. Now, wow. I realized how inadequate I was at that point in terms of motivating children to use protractors. And I realized that the technology and the gaming and the fulfillment of free choice and effective action on their part was going to take them somewhere. And that led to me leaving teaching only a year or 2 later and starting to write simulations for the next 10 years. So you can see that was my first engagement, the belief that children put in control of a computer could benefit from the excitement of it producing results for their actions, okay?
Right, that's hugely learner-centered, so that's that motivation. Okay, question 2 then. So what is your primary motivation behind your educational use of technology? Well,
yeah, this one seems a bit facile, I have to say. I've written to make the abstract concrete, meaning that lots of mathematics in particular, but also science and even social sciences can be worryingly abstract. But what we can do with simulations on the computer is make them become concrete because, again, they make decisions, responses are made by the computer. Now, this isn't the whole of education, but it is a particular motivation for me for using educational technology.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll move on to question 3. So could you describe in your experience effective educational use of technology in formal education?
Yeah, the trouble with question 3 is it's the same as question 7 and 8. And I quite like them to be in a different order, but that doesn't matter. I just have to avoid answering it the way I'm going to answer later. But my simple answer is to enhance the student's expressive power And that means the knowledge creation in the sense that the DES are talking about, the making of information and media. And at the same time, this is really important, at the same time, increasing their evaluative capability. In other words, they make a new piece of information, they make a new thing like your house, but then they need to be able to ask the question, is it working right? And they have to have the mechanisms, the criteria, the thinking processes that we can help them as teachers to have, to evaluate that. And of course, we as teachers can do that evaluation for them at some level, but then we can help them to develop the evaluation of power that craft demands in teaching and learning.
Fantastic. Okay, question 4. So could you describe in your experience effective learning outcomes from the educational use of technology in formal education? Well,
I'm going to read what I wrote because I tried to anticipate this question, and this is a hard one, but because effective learning outcomes are so many and so broad. But I wrote a deeper and broader insight into knowledge, and I mean knowledge as I wrote it earlier. Yeah, coupled with useful skills in the craft area and character, all those three, in other words, to then persist with learning using technology as an augmentation of their learning capacity. So that means that they need to be patient, they need to be optimistic, they need to persevere, those kind of heart things, if you want to call them that, that are so important. And so learning outcomes from the educational use of technology are that they can do that, because it's going to be with them the rest of their life. It's a bit like, pencil and paper is going to be with you the rest of your life. If you don't know how to use the damn thing, it's never going to be useful when you're 50 or 60 or 90, So the computer capacity to be able to use it, which Helen was talking about when she did her presentation with Powtoon, how did I make sense of Powtoon? That is, as a learning outcome, sounds very technology focused, but it isn't intended to be. It's meant to be learning capability focused.
Okay.
That's the most general kind of learning outcome I can think of.
Yeah, because it's a hard question. Like, it's a question that often teachers have difficulty answering.
Yeah.
Is what are the effective? Because people would sometimes maybe highlight how the kids have learned to use the technology, but that's not, again, what we're talking about, although that is part of the process.
And it's very troubling because we're often exhorted not to focus on the technology, but to focus on the pedagogy. But to me, the pedagogy is intimately bound up with the expressive power of the technology. And that's where this knowledge creation thing is coming in. So why should teachers be good at that? Unless they have the time, like Helen was saying, to learn Powtoon and to make sense of it, or Camtasia and PowerPoint. It's the same with the children. They need to learn how to use those tools to be able to be in that learning loop that I'll describe more in a minute if I get the chance.
Brilliant. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next question. So I'm really excited about your answer to this question, Richard. So question number 5 then is, what is your philosophy of education?
Yeah, so I mean, you nailed this earlier when you described me as learner-centered, and I am. I'm thoroughly learner-centered, which is not to say that I don't care about teachers and teachers' role and the systems that must be in place to help the learner be learner-centered, for Christ's sake. Yeah, my philosophy is that we should recognize the engine of learning that children have in their whole psyche. That they are inveterate learners. They want to learn, in fact, all the time. And that we defeat that sometimes, not deliberately, not because we're bastards, we're not Gradgrinds, but we defeat it simply because we don't give enough opportunity to free choice and effective action. These are drivers of delight in learning for me. And so the challenge to teachers is how to, on the one hand, do what the political masters and the parents and the industry want of us, to deliver certain outcomes of children's profiled to be future employees or citizens or whatever, to try and get over that and at the same and take confidence that children will learn if we only give them the space and the choices and the guidance on how to evaluate their learning. It's not like we're leaving them to discovery learning in a kind of hippie style 60s thinking, which I think is much maligned, by the way, and incorrectly, but that's nevertheless the myth we have. Yeah. Learner-centeredness isn't about that. Learner-centered is about how to support, how to guide, how to put frameworks in place so that children can build the capacity to be learner-centered in their own right.
Brilliant. Okay, we will move on to question 6 then. So question 6, in your experience, how is knowledge transferred?
Yeah, so you expect me to have a good answer to this, Dermot, because this was my PhD, yeah? And so you have to start with the question, you know, knowledge transferred, what do we mean by that? Do we mean knowledge like I described it, or do we mean knowledge as in media and information that children make or that teachers make and hope that children can make in the same way or by copycatting? No, what we mean by knowledge surely is something that sits in the mind of the learner and allows them to perform in the ways that I've described earlier. And I believe that that knowledge isn't transferred. It's not transferred. There's no little, you know, pipe that goes from teacher to child and you pour it down that pipe. And many people have said that. But there is something to be said about how they acquire the knowledge that the teacher has, which isn't the same as saying transferred. And the answer is they acquire it through expressing their ideas in response to what they hear from teachers and what they see from the resources and the books they read and the films they watch and so on. So for me, they need to express what they hear. And of course, when they hear things, they are expressing already. This is much misunderstood. When you go to a lecture, even the people that are listening to what I'm saying, they are being expressive because they're thinking thoughts. Their thoughts are their thoughts. They're not my thoughts. You can hear my voice, you can hear my words, but then you reconstruct that in your mind in the way that you hear it. And depending on your acquaintance with my particular words and your own ideas, you'll construct it differently. So Helen and Dermot and Hassan and anybody else who's listening are almost certainly making their own minor difference and take on what I'm saying, depending on their experience and their own inquiry into the philosophy of education. So expression is the key active thing that students do, followed by evaluation of their expression. They ask the question when they're thinking, does this make sense to me? They ask the question when they say something out loud, like I am doing, is Dermot nodding? Is Helen nodding? Are they showing me that they've understood what I'm saying, or are they just being polite? Yeah, and determining that, of course, is quite a difficult thing to do, but mostly when it comes to the verbal feedback that people give you, or even the written feedback from marking from a teacher, that can be really valuable in reconceptualizing your ideas, as long as you take it seriously and you're in the habit of taking it seriously. Yeah. So it's important that we understand the importance of marking and basic teacherly kind of activities like that. But of course, the crucial part is this is a dynamic, not simply an expression and an evaluation. It's a cycle. Having evaluated your expression, the key act in learning is you go back and re-express the same idea again, perhaps enhanced and deepened and perfected by the evaluation you've just done. And you go in that loop throughout your life. You never stop doing that. I'm still, in every time I explain this to people, what I've just been saying, perfect my own understanding of what I'm saying. I wake up in the night, you'll think I'm boring, but I wake up in the night thinking about it and thinking, I didn't get that right, did I? I need to say this a little bit more emphatically, or I need to add that nuance into the discussion to get clearer about what I'm talking about and to understand better what I think is going on in the world. In other words, to improve my knowledge, yeah, which is learning.
Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so question 7 and 8 then. So question 7, what pedagogy best supports the educational use of technology and why?
Yeah, so I think I've almost said enough about that already. Yeah, what I mean by that is I've said what my pedagogy is, but I haven't really linked it to the specific character of technology and how it can support that pedagogy. So I have a poster which I can link. You know, I have written a blog about this for tonight, so people can follow this up afterwards. And in it, I talk about what I call expressive creativity on the part of the learner and evaluative power on the part of the learner. These two parts of what I was talking about earlier. And how does technology enhance expressive creativity? Well, I argue that through delight, through automation, through multimodality, through provisionality, through constraint, through neutrality, and through quality. Now, I can't explain all of those, so I'll pick one, which is provisionality, okay? When a child goes to write something down, express their ideas in writing, they are rather troubled, especially if they use a pen, by the fact that as they write, they're making a permanent mark. That means that to correct it, they have to get the Tipp-Ex out or start a new piece of paper, just tear it up and throw it away and start again in order to correct it. And that, I think, is daunting. But when we use a word processor, and once we know how word processors work, we know we can start writing, and we know we're going to be able to correct it and leave a perfect copy and something that looks nice and is more accurate, if you like, because we've had a chance to review it before submitting it to anybody else in a much cheaper way, in a much more effective way than pen and paper or any other way of expressing ideas. That's what digital technology has brought, this kind of fluidity of expression, this capacity. And if you know that in advance of expressing ideas, that you're going to be provisional about them, and you can start sketching things and then fix them up as you go along and check the spelling later. That can hearten the kind of child who is obsessed with getting their spelling right and hates the fact that they can't. Or they like to get the typography looking good, so it's clear and readable, but they hate the fact that their handwriting is so poor that they cannot construct the right letters the way they want them to be. But with a computer, by God, they've got fonts to call on, they can change the size, they can make it as clear as they like, and they can do that after they've started writing. So they don't have to stop on the basis that, oh God, it's going to look awful. Now, I'm a personal fan of this idea of provisionality, because when I was at school, my handwriting was abysmal. And I found myself in second level learning as a student, writing in uppercase letters only, because I just could not form the kind of handwriting that I believed was nice. And I hated it, and I didn't write much. And I ended up being a mathematician for that reason, because you don't have to write much in maths, not like you have to in English or in history or geography. And I was never in the social sciences as a school child for that reason, I believe. I'm much more interested in those things now. So I've picked on the particular feature of technology that supports my pedagogical model, in this case, to answer your question. I hope that was helpful. Of course, if you go to my PhD, you can read all the other ones, and that will be homework for everybody.
Brilliant. And I think Hassan will share the link as well on YouTube. Final question, Richard. So formal education in the 21st century should look like because?
Now, this is such a challenging thing. I can't easily answer this question, but I can say what the criteria are. Yeah, and the criteria are that we, when we design that future learning for children, we put them at the center of that educational design. And I have a poster for that, which again is linked by that link we talked about. That poster tries to list the 8, as I conceive it, questions that a learner needs to be able to answer. And typically what happens in education at the moment is that we answer them for them. We don't give them the chance to begin to engage with those questions very much. We take it as our responsibility as teachers to do it. But my belief is that 21st century learning, they will answer those questions. And just so you get an idea of what they are, the 8 keywords are motivation, importance, meaning the importance of what they're learning. Why is it important? Process, how am I doing this? Community, how is everybody else going to help me? Environment, where and when am I going to be doing this? Source, where does it come from and how do I know it's good? Assessment, meaning the formative assessment, how do I know that I've achieved anything and what am I going to do next? And then finally, number 8 is recognition, the idea that I get some kind of reward, authoritative accreditation, a qualification from this. What's that going to be? How does that work? Now, we need to help children to answer those questions for themselves, not just because that's 21st century learning for me, but because it means that they're able to learn in the 22nd century as well. The whole of their life, they're going to be able to learn because they are aware of the educational process that surrounds them. I don't think it's as complicated as I make it or as hard for them to do this. It's a matter of engaging them in that process and having them take part in the organization of learning, not just be subject to the organization of learning. And that's not in any way to diminish our skill and our expertise as teachers to do that organization well. It's simply to say we must hand the responsibility over through the life of a child in progressive ways through from primary to secondary and beyond.
That's fascinating, Richard. Obviously, there's so many follow-up questions there that we could have, but I guess it's back to you, Helen, thank you so much for answering those, Richard. Obviously, thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I guess it's back to Helen, and Helen, yeah.
Yes, and absolutely fascinating. You know, I think I'm going to have to rewatch this again, you know, because there's just so much that you've said there, Richard, and so much to go from there. So I'm just conscious of time, and like it's late on a Wednesday evening. I don't know. I just want to check if people are sending any questions, maybe to Hassan on YouTube. I don't see anything here, but if you know, okay, just going to. So no questions. That's what Hassan is saying. So I don't have anything other than maybe just to wrap up here, and thank you very much, Richard, for the time for spending with us this evening. It's really, you know, a lot to think about, and you too, Dermot. Like, you know, just these webinars, you know, I come away and learn so much from these, you know, as well. So that you know, empowers us for the next time.
And Helen, you know where I live. I mean, in other words, you know my email and my Twitter details and so on. And that goes for you too as well. People can always come back with questions later when they realize the enormity of what they missed. Look, what I mean is we pushed a lot out, you know, a lot of complex stuff out, and I know I'm guilty of that. So if there's a clarification that comes later, I'm ready for it and I'm willing to respond.
Okay, great. So I think I think there's no questions. So we'll wrap up. I know that we have what's lined up in a month's time. Oh, Dermot has something to say. Okay, I'll pass.
I do, Helen. We need to plug the upcoming CESI conference.
Yes.
And at the moment, there is the call for presentations. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
So if there's anybody in primary, post-primary, third level, even
further education,
even preschool, I think, at this stage, that if they are interested in submitting a proposal to present at the CESI conference, which will take place online, they can find out more details about this on cesi.ie, which is the website, and call for presentations up there. And the conference date, Helen, is
27th of February, Saturday, 27th of February, and it is online. Yeah.
And are we allowed to announce the keynote speaker?
I don't know.
it just went out on Twitter.
Okay, great. And it's digital. What is it? The theme is the. Just remind me the theme again.
It's on the website.
It's on the website. Yes, it's late. It's late on a Wednesday night. It's been a long day. No, it's the changing digital framework. That's what we're all living within, and this is perfect. What we've been talking about today.
Adapting digitally to a changing reality.
That's
yes,
it.
Saturday, 27th of February. And so, who's our next guest, Helen? Who's next in the? If we can get anybody to match the eloquence.
I can tell you personally that it's Tony Riley, and he's considerably better than I am.
No. We have a change. Yes, we have a change.
Oh, it's not. It's not Tony. I'm sorry.
Tony will be. Tony's is lined up. It's Mr. Hassan Daba.
Even better then.
So we're going to be talking about. So at this time of the year, you know, if you're an IT coordinator or if you're in a school, you know, you're going to start thinking about, you know, hardware and software requirements, and so just getting your head around that. And it's like all part of that digital learning framework that you have to think in. So it's the implementation. Is there anything else you want to add, Hassan or Dermot, to that?
Do you know what? I think, first of all, Richard, thank you very much. I think it's very mean that you're putting me on as right after Richard. Like, seriously. Honest to God, could you not have put me after somebody else? But no. That's, in a nutshell, that's what I'll cover. It's that time of year. You're halfway through. Computers have broken. The ones that are broken are now fixed. How can we get them back up and running for the year ahead? Some simple solutions and some simple hacks as well. That'll help you out.
And can I, just before we go, Hassan, this is something that jumped in, and Richard, you might jump in on this quickly. Hassan, if you don't mind me saying, you perhaps felt a bit of trepidation about putting your name forward to present, as you are an outsider to the teaching profession in the sense that you're not a practicing but qualified teacher. However, there would be a unique insight that would come from your perspective on digital learning.
Yes, I think I prefer it when you put Helen on the spot, Dermot, frankly. Yeah, I wasn't, I felt it's not the outsider. The outsider is fine because I get to see things in a school that maybe not everybody gets to see. But I feel that teachers learn, the peer-to-peer thing is teachers learning from teachers. Do they really need to know how the computer works or how to make it work better? Should it not just work? That's my fear. Should the teacher not go in and like a light switch, it should just work?
That's Hassan, you're spot on. It's such an interesting question. And can I just say that unlike, say, the bridge that you cross the river with, or the car that you start in the morning, which mostly starts, you're right. Computer technology has been plagued over the years with being unreliable, poorly designed, difficult to get going, hard to learn when new software, and teachers are assailed by those challenges. So you need to pay attention to it, but not necessarily to reassure them that everything's going to be fine, but to give them strength and resilience, patience, optimism, and perseverance in the face of such a messy implementation. And the reason for it is because the technology has in no way settled down yet. Cars are, I mean, I know cars are still developing, but then, the rate of change for computers is, new models are every year, new features, speed doubling every few years, all that kind of stuff. And suddenly, speech to text, optical character recognition, funny things happening that we didn't know we could do even. I think this is a persistent and painful challenge for teachers. It's been going on all the life I've had in technology, and it's your insight and your thinking about that, your abilities and your competence and your character, can I say, about how to deal with it, that they need the succor of having a conversation with you about. So go for it and be brave and don't doubt that teachers are struggling with it and that you can help them.
Thank you very much, Richard. I do have no doubt that teachers are struggling with it, and there are solutions available, but just not being implemented at the moment.
Yeah, but don't be an apologist for the technology.
Don't be a what?
An apologist for the technology.
I'm not. I'm an educational technologist.
You should give them the power of your critique of it,
I pride myself on being an educational technologist, and I didn't know what that was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's just back to to present here in this forum.
Yeah.
I felt the peer-to-peer teachers learn from teachers. It should be about the pedagogy other than the mechanics of it. The mechanics of the technology.
I reject that analysis. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. I accept your rejection.
Not because you're wrong, but because it's not subtle enough. It's not an either or. It's not a this or that. The fact is that the technology and its expressive power is deeply bound up in learning and pedagogy. And that's what I've been trying to say tonight. So as a result of that, you need to be able to face the misery of dealing with the damn technology and its failings.
But I don't think, okay, so we're going down a rabbit hole now, and at 48 minutes, yeah. But
that's the trailer for next month.
Yes. That 48 minutes.
Don't doubt the importance.
Thank you, each and every one of you, and stay safe, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks' time again.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Helen. Bye. Thank you, Hassan. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Okay. We